Good afternoon. My name is Ian Dodd, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Community Church of Santa Monica, and this, the very first public event to be put on by our new free thought group, AAHS, Agnostics, Atheists, Humanists and Secularists. As I look out there, I see a lot of familiar faces from our church community, and I appreciate you guys coming out and supporting us. Even better, I look out and I see a number of unfamiliar faces. So whether you were invited by a friend, or a friend of a friend, or Dale, or you found our Facebook page, I'd like to extend a special welcome to all of you from the larger community. We're really glad you're here. I'm guessing that most of you are some variety of religious non-believer. I invited all of my fundamentalist Christian friends on Facebook, but they all declined. I'm thinking maybe there was a Michelle Bachmann rally in town. Anyway, if you feel a little queasy about actually being inside a church, don't worry, nobody's going to douse you with holy water today. Actually, you're sitting in a church where nearly half the congregation identifies themselves as some variety of agnostic, atheist, or humanist. And if you find the idea of a church full of skeptics a bit vexing, any one of us will be happy to give you the elevator speech about Unitarianism and can point you to some printed material that you can hide away and read later when you're safely away from the view of your other atheist friends. Now, you didn't come here to hear me speak, so I'm just going to say a few brief words before I turn it over to the people you did come to hear. When you came in, hopefully, I'm sure my good friends did a good job, you were given a brochure with some information about our group, a short questionnaire, because we'd love to know who you are, and an envelope where you can make a donation for today's program with a note card to write down some questions for our speakers. After our speakers have their say, we'll take a brief intermission, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll get right into the question and answer session. At that time, you will have an opportunity to make a donation to support the efforts of our group, AAHS. And after that, we'll get right into the conversation. So be thinking about what you'd like to ask our speakers and jot them down on your note cards. Our first speaker today is Dr. Phil Zuckerman. Dr. Zuckerman is a professor of sociology at Pitzer College, and his research interests include atheism, agnosticism, apostasy, and Scandinavian secular societies. He is the author of Society Without God, and his newest book, released just this month, is Faith No More: Why People Reject Religion. Dr. Zuckerman is also a faculty advisor for the newest academic offering at Pitzer, an interdisciplinary program in secular studies, the first of its kind in the nation. And for those of you who have ever heard my sermon on aweism, that's a phrase that I stole directly from him in an article he wrote for Free Inquiry magazine. Following Dr. Zuckerman, we will welcome to the podium Mr. Greg Epstein. Greg is the Humanist Chaplain at Harvard University, the director of the Humanist Communities Project, which we'll be hearing more about today, and the author of the New York Times bestseller, Good Without God: What a Billion Non-Religious People Do Believe. Greg has appeared in media outlets from ABC News and Al Jazeera to National Public Radio and the New York Times, and is in many ways one of the public faces of humanism in America today. There's the cottonmouth I was afraid of, coming in. It's a characteristic well understood by psychologists that human beings respond better to stories than statistics. So before Dr. Zuckerman treats us to his work that will show us how we are not alone, I'd like to share with you just a brief personal story, one that I hope you can relate to. I grew up in a small conservative town in western Colorado. If you think of some place like Lynchburg, Virginia as the buckle of the Bible Belt, Grand Junction would be like the back belt loop. About as far away as you can get, but still very connected. I was raised as a second-generation atheist, my parents having rejected the faiths of their childhoods as they were young people in college. I endured the playground taunts of my schoolmates, the accusations that my family were devil worshippers, the threats that I would burn for all eternity in hell. At one point I told my parents, when we move to a new town, can we just not tell people we don't believe in God? Fast forward about 40 years, and I'm now raising my own children as third-generation freethinkers. They have no qualms about professing their lack of belief in the supernatural. They've grown up in an era when the moral hypocrisy of religious leaders is exposed in the media. Books like The End of Faith and The God Delusion spend weeks on the bestseller list. And the internet has caused a virtual space for skeptics from around the world to find community. Many of us probably never imagined that we'd see an African American elected to the presidency within our lifetimes. Is it too much to imagine that our children may someday elect a leader who doesn't have to, quote, appeal to a higher father before making critical decisions? So, There's been too much ado already, and at this point, I'd like to offer a warm welcome to Phil Zuckerman and Greg Epstein.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's interesting for me to be in church. But it's quite nice. I've actually spoken at a couple UU congregations, and they're wonderful. But every time I go, I realize that my wife is actually more secular than I am, because I always leave the UU churches with this like warm and fuzzy feeling. And I come home and I say, you know, we ought to check out the UU church. And my wife says, why? And I said, oh, well, there's like a nice community. And she goes, community. So... thanks to Ian. Ian's a real good emailer. You know, like emailing is kind of an art. And Ian's got it down. He writes these like really well-written, thoughtful, amicable, friendly emails. So thank you. I wish my mom would do that. No, just kidding. Okay, let's see. The Rise of Irreligion, Causes and Consequences, I think was what the committee finally agreed on for the title of my talk. And so I'll do that. I will start with a little bit of history. I found a book, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's really fascinating. But I'll just tell you what it's about. About 500 years ago, in a small town in northern Italy, near a town called Friuli, near Pordenone. I've been to Italy like 7 times. I hadn't heard of either of those places. Was a peasant named Domenico Scandella, but he was known by everyone as Minocchio. And he made he had a lot of different odd jobs. He played guitar at various festivals. He even started a school where kids learned basic math and reading and writing. But primarily he worked as a miller. He could read. He loved books. He was married. He had 11 kids. And he was actually quite popular. He had a lot of friends. And there was a brief period where he was like an interim mayor at one point. So he was of good standing in his little village. But there was something interesting about him. He was a non-believer. 500 years ago, in Italy, he had serious doubts about Christianity, serious doubts about Catholic teachings, which, for reasons I'm not quite sure, he shared with people. For example, he said it's impossible for Jesus to have been born of a virgin mother. He did not think Jesus was divine. And he didn't understand how something could vicariously save people from their sins. He said, you know, if you do something wrong, you have to make amends and you have to apologize. Somebody else can't do that for you. He thought, this is before Burton Mack, he thought that, this is before Robert Price, this is 500 years ago, he thought that the Gospels appeared to be fabrications. He did not believe they were telling the truth. He didn't believe in immortality or heaven and hell, and he said, quote, when the body dies, the soul dies too. As for God, he took a sort of poetic approach. He said, God is nothing but earth, water, and air. God is nothing more than a little breath or whatever else man imagines him to be. He also thought the priests were, having fun at the expense of everyone else. He said, priests want us under their thumb just to keep us quiet while they have a good time. He saw religion as a racket way back then. He said the Pope, the cardinals, the bishops are so great and rich that everything belongs to the church and to the priests. It's all a matter of business. This is 500 years before the writings of Rodney Stark. That said, he was no nihilist. He was a wonderful, warm man, altruistic. He taught that we should be concerned about helping each other while we are still in this world. He taught that men should live in peace, and it's a greater rule to love one's neighbor than to love God, and that his only goal in life was to do good. So now this is 16th century Italy. This is the height of medieval Catholic hegemony. Roman Inquisition is in full swing. So this was not just impolite chatter. This was just not inappropriate talk around your in-laws' dinner table. This was dangerous stuff. So, of course, as you can imagine, Minocchio was arrested many times. He was friends with the priests who kept imploring him to stop this stuff. And he'd always say, oh, I'll stop. And then at the next market day, he was telling whoever about this or that. So he was, of course, eventually arrested a final time. He was imprisoned at the age of 67. He was tortured and finally burned at the stake. Interestingly enough, they called him in so many times and took detailed records of every inquisition, every back and forth, every trial. They called in all his friends. They called in some of his family. They called in everybody. And all these documents were written down by a scribe of the Catholic Inquisition. And then they were left in a vault until the 1970s, when a historian who was looking for something else found them. And so we have the original transcripts that tell us so much about this guy. And it's fascinating. I mean, you have to wonder. I have to wonder, how did Ian's folks in in Grand Junction, Colorado, inside Colorado joke, we wonder, how did they come to lose their faith? Or those of you here in the audience, you probably have stories about, maybe you were raised in a religious home, but something happened where you didn't quite believe or you had doubts. Now imagine 500 years ago in Catholic Italy in a small village. So what this is, it's fascinating. But what it most tells me, and what I get the most out of reading this book about Minocchio, is that it's proof that there have always been non-believers. There have always been secular men and women, even in the most religious times and in the most religious of cultures. Streams of secularity have undoubtedly flowed through every society, even, and perhaps this was the case for most of history, even if that stream was merely a trickle. But there have always existed men and women here and there who devoted the lion's share of their attention and energy to this world, channeling their love and work into this life rather than worrying about or even giving much thought to some purported world beyond. Men and women who, in their hearts, suspected or maybe even knew for certain that this existence is all there is and there's nothing more. Men and women who loved their family and friends rather than a deity. Men and women who sought to do good and treat others right because they understood that such behavior makes the world a better place. Men and women who sat in church or temple or mosque or synagogue and deep inside doubted or simply passed the time in the pews looking out the windows. Which is why I suspect churches have stained glass windows so you can't even see the clouds. Men and women who found religious rituals banal, religious leaders suspect, and religious accounts of existence to be just so much human invention. Men and women who looked up at the stars at night and thought, what an amazing mystery, and left it at that. Men and women who found joy, splendor, and meaning in newborn babies and in thunderstorms, peaches and tears, algebra and altruism, squid and irony, without attaching any supernatural or divine masking tape to such wonders of life. But today, while we can look back and think, wow, who was this Minocchio? Was he the only one? Were there others? We can look around today, though, and know that such Minocchios abound. Now, it's not such a rarity. It's not such an extremely bizarre story. Now there are hundreds of millions of people who eschew religious faith and religious involvement in favor of other forms of association and a decidedly naturalistic worldview. So in short, secularity has never been so widespread, so open, and so overt as it is right now. What do we mean by secularity? That's tough. What do we mean by secular? There's a debate about that among my colleagues. I think on the one hand, the simplest definition of secular is just, whatever religion is, it's not that. Non-religious, the opposite of religious. But some people don't like that because they feel it's still locating secular in relation to religion. So they'd rather say, no, secularity, that's someone who maintains a naturalistic worldview. Someone who maintains a look at the world without reference to supernatural assumptions or whatnot. Well, whatever secularity means, and it means different things to different people, and there's different versions and different varieties, we know it's on the rise. And I just have to give you some statistics. And I agree with Ian that stories are much better than statistics, but these statistics clearly tell a story. So bear with me. We have seen an incredible rise of irreligion, as the title of my talk indicates. Let's start with Canada. Over 100 years ago, only 2% of the population claimed to have no religion, but today, nearly 30% of Canadians claim to have no religion, and approximately 1 in 5 does not believe in God. That's quite a rise in 100 years. In Australia, 100 years ago, less than 1% of the population claimed to have no religious identity, but today, approximately 20% of Australians claim no religious identity. And the current Prime Minister of Australia, Ian, you can tell your kids, Julia Gillard is an open atheist. Not a closeted, but an open atheist. We've seen exploding rates of secularity even more dramatically in Europe. A century ago in Holland, around 10% of the population claimed to be non-religious. Today, it's over 40%. In Great Britain, today, approximately half of the people claim no religious identity at all. The same is true in Sweden, where half the population are secular, self-identified as secular. 61% of Czechs, 49% of Estonians, 45% of Slovenians, 34% of Bulgarians, and 31% of Norwegians do not believe in God. And furthermore, 33% of the French, 27% of Belgians, and 25% of Germans do not believe in God or any sort of universal spiritual life force. Such levels of irreligiosity or secularity are historically unprecedented. And beyond these countries, beyond the West, there are significant chunks of non-religious people all around the globe. In Uruguay, Japan, South Korea, Israel, Azerbaijan, just to name a few disparate examples. In fact, Daniel Everett has found evidence of atheistic worldviews among some people living in dense parts of the Amazon jungle. Well, what about us? What about the USA? God's country. Since I started graduate school, the United States was always held up as the ultimate example, the ultimate counterexample to this wave of secularization. That, okay, maybe in Western Europe, all right, well, maybe in Japan, but it's different over there. But the United States, we're a wealthy country, so we are told. We're a technologically advanced country, an industrialized country, we're a democracy, and yet isn't religion booming here? And doesn't that prove that religion's here to stay? And doesn't that prove that the secularization thesis is just the wishful thinking of some Europeans? It is true that the United States, on average, Americans are much more religious than Canadians, Australians, Europeans. In fact, we are much more like El Salvadorians in our church attendance and our belief in the Bible and God than we are compared to, say, British. And yet, what's really exciting for me as an academic who studies this stuff is in the last 25 years, there's been a boom of irreligiosity, even here in God's America. Even here where religion seems so strong in our political life, so strong in our school boards, so strong in the media, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, it's undeniable. So let me give you some statistics on the United States. The percentage of Americans who claim none when asked, what is your religion, was 8% in 1990. And today, the latest I've seen from Robert Putnam's survey is 17%. So from 8% in 1990 to 17% today saying, when asked what is your religion, they say none. That means that the number of nuns in America has increased by over 140%. Nuns, right, N-O-N-E-S, in the last 25 years, making nonism the fastest growing religious orientation, for lack of a better word, in the country. In absolute numbers, it means that approximately 660,000 Americans join the ranks of non-religious every year. So non-religious Americans are now the third largest orientation or religious group in the country. And Americans without a religious affiliation now comprise the only religious group, quote-unquote, growing in all 50 states. Rates of secularity are markedly stronger among younger Americans. 27% of American 20-somethings self-identify as N-O-N-E, none. Now, this is really significant because back in the 80s, among the 20s, among those between 18 and 29, evangelical Christians outnumbered non-religious 20-somethings by a ratio of 2 to 1. Today, it has flipped. So in just 20 years, today, 20-something nuns now outnumber 20-something evangelicals by a ratio of 2 to 1. Can I get an amen for that? Thank you. Okay. I'll let the chaplain ask for amens. Okay. Yes. Another study said that 27% of Americans currently do not practice any religion, and 22% say that religion is simply not a factor in their lives. And somewhere between 12% and 21% are actually atheistic or agnostic. And again, these are simply the highest rates of irreligiosity we have ever recorded in U.S. history. Ever. Now, of the nuns, those that say they're non-religious, approximately half are atheistic or agnostic. Another 25% believe not in a personal God, but in a higher power, and the remaining 25% are God believers. So that means while not all nuns are atheists or agnostics, about half are. It's quite an increase. Thank you for listening to my statistics. You made it. So describing social phenomena is easy. It's easy to count bodies. It's easy to count numbers. It's easy to look at yes, no's, how people tick. So describing this recent rise of irreligion is easy. Explaining it, well, I'll turn it over to Greg. No, that's the hard part. So I will try, but now I'm starting to read tea leaves. Maybe I should consult with my higher father. Dad? Okay. Anyway. Okay. Social theorists have tried to theorize about what causes secularization over throughout history. And there are some big kind of theories. Some people talk about it's just education. The more widespread an education, the more widespread a population is educated, religiosity tends to decrease. And there's a lot of data that shows that. Others have talked about well-being and security. Do people live secure lives where they're not faced with hunger, starvation, warfare, etc., etc.? And there's a lot of data showing that the more content and secure and peaceful a society is, the less religious it will be. And those are all good explanations. But I would argue that I don't think there's a universal cause for secularization that applies to every society and every culture. Every culture is different. Every society has its own historical heritage. So I actually think that there's going to be unique things that cause irreligiosity to rise in different situations. And what causes secularity in Denmark may not be the same thing that causes secularity in Japan or Uruguay. And we have to be careful to have a blanket theory that says, well, X, Y, or Z will always cause irreligion, and that's that. It just doesn't work that way. It's too complex. So I actually think we have to look at some specific causes if we're going to talk about the United States. And that's what I'm going to try and do. How do we explain this recent boom of secularity and irreligiosity in the last 20, 25 years? And based on my own opinion and those of my colleagues like Barry Cosman out in Connecticut, I will tell you what I think are my top seven reasons. Number one, this is not in order. In fact, if you asked me to order them, they would probably be different. But I'll just go through them. Some would argue that the Clinton years have something to do with this, the 1990s. This was a period of peace and prosperity in the United States. And we know that peace and prosperity tend to increase secularity or decrease the need for religiosity. When things are going good, when people have jobs, when there's a drop in crime rates, as there was throughout the 90s, when there's a healthy economy and no invading Canadians, this seems to perhaps lower the need for the comfort and security that religion can provide in uncertain times. It's also people may be more psychologically willing to make a change. They feel safe, they feel secure, things are okay. I think I'll stop going to church. I've been wanting to for a long time. And they're not afraid of any consequences. So that's one possibility. I think the second possibility, and the data from the Boston area really shows this, there's really strong data here, is that the Catholic pedophile scandal really had an effect. A lot of people just didn't want to be associated with the Catholic Church anymore. These were probably people who maybe weren't strong believers, but were happy to be part of church anyway. Maybe their wife was into it, maybe their husband was into it, they liked the community, they liked their friends, whatever. They didn't believe in this or that, but they went anyway. But somehow this Catholic priest scandal gave them the impetus to say, wait a minute, this is not okay, and in fact, I don't want to be labeled as such. So the next time that survey calls and asks what my religion is, I'm going to say I don't have one, because I don't want to say Catholic, because I'm so angry at this scandal. Number 3, I think 9/11. And again, it's interesting because on the one hand, there's no doubt that 9/11 increased religiosity. I mean, people came together in their churches. People came together in their synagogues and their mosques. I mean, 9/11 was certainly an event to create more collective coming together. But I think it also gave strong religiosity a bad name. If it didn't have one already, people thought, these people were motivated by religion. And I'm not so happy about it. And then Jerry Falwell gets on Pat Robertson's show and says, I blame this on the feminists and the secularists. I think a lot of people said no, something's going on here. And I'm sure that Sam Harris's bestseller, The End of Faith, got its bestseller status because it was written post 9/11. And people were hungry for this kind of critique. Number 4, a reaction to George W. Bush. Here's a person open. I want to say president, but I think the president was Cheney, so I don't know what to say. Here was a presidential frontman who was open about his faith, open about his evangelical Christian. Now, Jimmy Carter was too, but not in the same way as George W. Bush. And I think it really didn't look good. I mean, do you know that George W. Bush had a weekly telephone call with the president of the Evangelical Association of America from Colorado by the name of... What was his name?
Dobson?
No, not Dobson. The guy that was paying Ted Haggard, yes. This was his values advisor. The man who was scoring illegal drugs with his male prostitute. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But sorry. Careful. I forgot I was in Santa Monica. Okay. It didn't look good. That was that guy had a weekly phone call with George W. Bush. And he wouldn't even take calls from Feinstein or Boxer. I mean, this is serious stuff. And I think people saw, well, this is what a man of prayer, a man of the Bible, a man of God is doing. They didn't want to be associated with that. Number 5, and this is, of course, related to the previous, I think a lot of people are leaving religion as a reaction against this increased intermingling of religion and right-wing conservative political agendas. It's so explicit now. I remember hearing a radio interview with ex-President Ford before he passed away, where Ford was talking about this, saying, I never saw this before when I was a Republican. You never saw this open embrace of a clear evangelical agenda. And it's just so explicit that a lot of people who didn't support what was going on in El Salvador with the Contras way back when, but didn't support the war, the invasion and bombing of Iraq, don't support the slashing of welfare to hungry families and hospitals and our educational systems, who don't support the death penalty, don't support the governmental use of torture. I mean, it's fascinating. Pew did studies when George W. Bush was legally instituting torture. They asked people, do you support the governmental use of torture? You know which groups were the most in favor of the governmental use of torture? It was evangelical Christians and Mormons. And the groups that were most against were atheists and secularists and NONESs. And I think a lot of people in the middle, your average, liberal person going to the liberal Methodist church or the liberal Episcopalian church or the nice Presbyterian church, just suddenly said, hey, I don't have anything in common with this group, and these are the people that are being outspoken Christians. The Ann Coulters, who wear crucifixes while they say we need to go in and kill the government and convert everybody to Christianity. Bad PR for Christians. They got to bring Jimmy Carter back in. And then 6, related to the above, and I think, again, the data is really strong here. a greater acceptance of homosexuality in our society, thanks to Harvey Milk and others, which has made, and I'm seeing it with my college students now. Granted, it's Pitzer College, which isn't, typical, but there's the younger, and all the data nationally, the younger generation simply does not have an issue with this form of love and is widely accepting of much more than previous generations of homosexuality, homosexual rights, the normalcy of it all, and of course, gay marriage. And the only opposition to this is coming from religious quarters. There is no secular anti-gay rights movement. There is no secular opposition to gay marriage. It's only religious. And people are being turned off by it. And in my own research, I have interviewed Mormons, Christians, Catholics, Jews, who cite this, things, Prop 22, Prop 8, these issues as the number one thing that's getting them to walk away. Related anecdote, I just came across this one just to illustrate this. I like Scandinavia, forgive me. But in Finland, in October of 2010, so about a year ago, there was a televised debate in Finland about gay marriage, the rights of homosexuals to have children, adopt children, and so on and so forth. And of course, the opposition was from the National Church of Finland. They weren't official higher-ups, but they were of the Finnish National Church, and they were, of course, speaking out against gay rights, gay marriage, gay adoption. Within 2 weeks of this televised debate in Finland, 40,000 Finns had officially quit the National Lutheran Church. Now, in a nation of only 5.5 million people, that is a huge loss, 40,000 in 2 weeks. And I just use that to say it's happening in Finland, it's happening here. And finally, number 7, which Ian already alluded to, I think the internet is at play. And I think it's actually at play at 2 levels. Yes, I agree with Ian that on the one hand, it's creating an ability to reach out. If you're a kid in Arkansas, and, you're from a Bible-thumping family, and you have doubts, you don't believe, 20 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever, you were alone. Good luck navigating that. Now, you just, in 3 seconds, you are linked to others in your town, the town over, or across the world or across the country, where you can get, Jim's critique of the Bible in 12 parts or whatever. You can just watch, you can find others who have doubts, who are skeptical, who are free thinkers, and it's instantaneous, and it's easy, and it can be relatively anonymous. So I think that's helping a lot of people. But I think there's something else going on. Not only does it create community and allow people to connect with each other, but I actually think the internet itself may be having a secularizing effect on the users. And I'm getting into weird territory here, and I'm about to wind down, but I think there's something about that interface with technology that is allowing people to feel something that is more interesting or more engaging or more than what they're getting at church. I don't know how to explain it. It's psychological, but I just have this theory that the internet itself may be making religion a little less appealing and fulfilling something that's being fulfilled intellectually, psychologically, I don't know, in one's personal development that you used to get from religion, but you're getting more and better on YouTube. Now, as I conclude, I was asked to talk about causes and consequences. Whew! What are the consequences of the rise of irreligion? Man, I really wish I could just hand it over to Greg here, but I said I would do it. Sociology is a soft science, but it becomes even softer when we try to predict the future. What will the rise of irreligion mean? What will happen? Okay, I'll end with some speculations, but then I think this is better for a discussion Q&A type conversation. First of all, I'm not so sure that this rise of irreligion is going to continue. I don't believe in some imminent secularization that's just manifestly unfolding with modernity. I think these things wax and wane, and I would actually bet, if I had to bet, that if global warming continues, and if the gap between the rich and poor continues, and if the Republicans continue to destroy the country, I would assume, and the world for that matter, that we should, sorry, the 2 Republicans that are here, then I would think people are going to cling to religion with greater fervor. I mean, nothing provides psychological and comfort and communal comfort than religion. So, I mean, I think if things get more precarious in this world, we will see a rise of religion, not irreligion. But if that doesn't happen, and if irreligion continues to rise, or at least stay where it's at and hold right here, then what would I predict? Well, 5 things. First of all, I would assume we're going to see more Ahs, as in agnostics, atheists, humanists, and secularists at the UU Church. I think we're going to see more secular humanist groups emerging. Why do I say that? People need community. And we are social beings, except for my wife. And secular alternatives to religion and the community it creates have got to emerge. Camp Quest, the work of Greg Epstein, are obvious examples. And I think we're going to see more and more and more groups like this. We need them. Number 2, I think the religious right is going to weaken and lose influence. But as it does so, it's going to become more vitriolic, more hostile, and more aggressive. So I think the culture war will get more intense. I do think we are becoming bifurcated. I think more and more people are leaving religion, and those that are staying in religion are becoming more fervent and right-wing in that religiosity. That's my prediction. Number 3, well, if irreligion continues to grow, I think we're simply going to see a more rational approach to social problems, more rational approaches to global warming, poverty, crime, etc., etc. I'm certain that women's rights will increase. If there's anything that correlates with secularity, it's rights of women. And if there's anything that correlates with strong religiosity, it's patriarchy. So I'm absolutely certain that things will get better for women if religion gets weaker. And of course, things will get much, much better for homosexuals. So my final prediction is that I think gay rights will continue to be supported and will grow and become more and more of a non-issue. But that's as far as I'm willing to speculate. I wonder what you think about what this portends. Thank you so much for listening.